Today's a great day because I'm in Steve Sondheim's garden, and I get to ask Steve all about his work today. And I've got many questions that I've wanted to ask probably my whole life.
There's nothing wrong about writing a bad song. There's something wrong about writing a wrong song. You mustn't waste your time writing a wrong song. It's okay to waste your time writing a bad song.
I don't know if that aphorism's going to catch on, but I...
no, but it's okay to write a bad song.
Yeah, right.
But it's not okay to write a wrong song. Oh, by okay, I mean you've wasted your time.
Yeah.
And sometimes you write a really good wrong song.
These basic fundamental things did they constitute most of what you end up teaching when you teach?
Yeah, all those. You know, I have a mantra, which is, that consists of three principles, which is content dictates form and style, less is more, and God is in the details. And I think if you pay attention to those three, you can't write bad. That's all you have to. It's so simple. I've often said, you can teach lyric writing in 5 minutes. Just stick to those. They're just hard to stick to. That's all. Well, that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. And economy is, clarity is, above all, clarity is what it's about. It's clarity of diction, clarity of, the words have got to sit on the music in such a way. That's right. And clarity of thought. Make very clear to the audience. You can have mystery to it. Make very clear to the audience what you mean. And be sure that the character, that the performer can, particularly when straitjacketed by music, can get the words out so that only need one listening and you get exactly
who they are and what they mean.
It's very hard to do, but if you do it, you can't write bad. It was a real wrench, but a wonderful one. My life changed when I started working with Lapine, because for the first time I was working with a whole other generation. I was working with, a little older than you and a lot younger than me, and James represented a whole new way of looking at the theater and a whole way of playwriting that was nowhere near as conservative as what I had come from, as my background. But then over a period of time, of course, I loved working with him and got used to working with him. But otherwise, it really has to do with people who have similar tastes. I suppose you could make out a case that in a way it stultifies you. I don't think it stultified me, but maybe there's a case. Maybe I would have turned out more interesting or even more work if I'd worked with different people all the way along. I can't tell either. But it's just getting in a room with John Weidman over the Lapine right away. I want to write. I don't have to suss them out. I and certainly never have to censor myself. I don't mind saying stupid things in front of them.
Would you describe the shift to Lapine and Weidman as in a way a break from a certain linearity that you had learned from Oscar that you were steeped
Yes,
in?
well, certainly with Lapine, absolutely, because Lapine's generation of playwrights, well, it actually started in the '60s with that whole group of playwrights of let's say John Guare and his colleagues at the time, Leonard Melfi and Lanford Wilson, a lot of people, and certainly Albee. They were bending the rules, so to speak. It was a whole new way of thinking. Although I've always been, as you know, attracted to experimental storytelling ever since I was 17, and Oscar made me a gopher on Allegro, because Allegro was a real attempt to do exactly what happened it's quite prophetic, what happened in the '60s. We did a special run-through of West Side just before the Gypsy run-through. I assume that people listening know what a Gypsy run-through is. The run-through for an uninvited audience from the theater.
And invited audience.
Yes.
Not an uninvited.
Uninvited audience. And Oscar was going away, so he couldn't do it. So we ran it for him, and the balcony scene was originally, what they sang on the balcony was One Hand, One Heart, believe it or not, a song of limited passion. And so he said, that you'd really need something that soars there. So what we did was we took the quintet had been written, just before the Rumble, And, you know, Tonight is in there. And we decided to take Tonight out of the quintet and make it the basis of the balcony scene, and we expanded a little bit and then used it as a reprise in the quintet, which worked very nicely. I can remember that specific piece of advice. And then he came down to Philadelphia to see Gypsy, and Arthur and I had a meal with him afterwards. And he said, I think it's wonderful, but there are 3 things that I would suggest you improve. One, and we eagerly listened, you know, thinking about it. The first thing he said was, the doorknob on the kitchen set keeps falling off. That should be fixed. Yes, I thought that what we really need is a smart ass, right, at this point. Because we knew something was not happening right with the show, we knew that. And he said, secondly, the scene where, in the Chinese restaurant, he said, you should end that with You'll Never Get Away From Me. You shouldn't, we had the song in the middle of the scene and there was dialogue afterwards. He said, generally it's a good idea to end the scene with a song, particularly that kind of scene, which is comic and romantic, right? And then he said, and he looked at me and he said, you're gonna kill me for this, but you have to give a hand to Ethel Merman at the end of Rose's Turn. I had written a high violin harmonic, so that she would end screaming, for me, for me, for me, and you'd hear in the orchestra this, and dead silence, and then in the wings, you hear Louise clapping. And he said, you can't do that. He said, you have to put a big ending on it. I said, but she's having a nervous breakdown. You can't put a big, I said, everything you taught me. You know, I got all worked up. He said, yeah, but the problem is there are things that happen in the theater that you got to take into account. And one of them is that the audience is waiting to applaud.
Was there anything about Oscar that you knew you didn't want to emulate in his work?
Not until I got older. Not until I had my Oedipal moment. It was Oscar himself who said, when I first started to write lyrics, he said, you're writing like me, you're imitating me, you're talking about nature and things like that. You don't believe in those things. He said, write what you believe. And then he said something very telling. He said, write what you believe and you'll be 99% ahead of the game. And I think he may even have said 99% ahead of everybody else. And as soon as he put it in those competitive terms, I thought, right. From that point on, I never used his kind of imagery again. And his kind of imagery often embarrasses me. You know, there's a lot about Oscar's lyrics that, you know, I find wet and embarrassing. You know, his ornithological obsession. You know, the fact that there is a bird in every single lyric that he's ever written. If it's not a lark, it's a willow. It's a hummingbird. It's a whip. It just, you know, that kind of nature imagery makes me cringe. Certain kinds of scores where you want to hold a score together, so it isn't just a group of disparate songs. What you do is you utilize as little material as possible and build on it, vary it. You know, Sweeney Todd is built out of about 3 or 4 themes. Not all the songs, but most of them. It's not an opera. It's not completely through composed, but a lot of it is. And Merrily Rolling is a show that exists on just that, on taking a theme and then making it the accompaniment, and taking the accompaniment, making that a theme, and making the release the main thing, and inverting and everything. It's all about manipulating things musically. And it isn't just an intellectual exercise, it gives a leanness. You have a feeling that those songs belong in that score and not in this score.
Yeah, you're not breaking any of your own rules. You create
and
this
it's not
world.
just style, it's the actual musical material. What I used to do with Julie is I would write out the rhythms and the rise and fall. For example, I remember writing Some People and going, some people can't, because I'd read that Cole Porter used to do that, that he would write, it was just one of those things, with the durations of the notes, but no pitches.
Sort of a Morse code.
Exactly.
Proportional.
And then he would pick his tune. I thought, that's really smart, and that's why his words sit so well on the music. And I thought, you know, that's a good thing to do. So I remember when I wrote Some People dry, and I took the first 8 bars, first section, and sketched them out that way. And then Julie picked the pitches, and shaped the melody. But I did that a lot with Julie, and he liked that.
Do you have a feeling in your gut, just an emotional signature about a song, about a situation and a character in a situation that happens first?
No, usually, well, my instinct to answer that is no, that what occurs first is the tone of the song. And that has to do with everything from comic tone to whether it's going to be terse or whether it's going to be verbose or whether it's going to be hysterical or whether it's going to be fast or slow. As opposed, and I think it's because I don't have to think long about what the emotion is going to be once you spot it. It's, as you say, if you take the rubbing and and something comes out at you, it's because what would come out at me is the emotional core of it. Now, how do you treat that emotional core? You know.
So does that lead to sitting at the piano, improvising in concert, or in the context of that emotional sense of it?
Yes, so quite often what will happen is I will let ask the book writer to write into the scene or maybe even the whole scene first. Or if I know, for example, the first song in Sondheim part with George, we knew that we wanted to introduce the relationship between Dot and George, and since the scene was that she was posing for him, it became clear that either he was going to sing an internal monologue or that she was going to sing an internal monologue, and it seemed to be her moment because he should be concentrating entirely. He shouldn't be having thoughts about, oh, this is what I think about her. You know, he's trying to say that line. You know, and so knowing that it was going to be her, then what determines the song is the fact that it's July or hot. It's a hot day, and she's in a heavy dress, and right away you've got half your song written because the situation is so specific. Then, knowing that she's in a heavy dress, on a hot day, you know she's going to be ill-tempered, and if you know she's going to be ill-tempered, right away. I mean, so it all channels right away. And since we didn't want her to be just a fetch, she's got to have a sense of humor about it. So, knowing all this, I said to James, can you write a monologue about this? And that's what he did. And then I took the monologue and changed it into a song. But it came back. But that's exactly the way I would approach it. So if you're 80% ahead of the game, as you know, if you have a situation that is juicy enough to sing about, as opposed to just two people meeting, you know. And so generally, I go for those moments and often ask them, since they are specific moments, the librettist can write that moment because it's very specific and it's part of the scene anyway. So I always try to get the librettist to do the hard work.
When you write things down, you write by hand.
Oh yeah.
And you don't get.
Oh no, I don't. Oh, I haven't learned the programs. No, I haven't learned the program. But I have a copyist, you know, so I hand her the handwritten manuscripts, and then she translates them.
Is it simply a matter of not wanting to learn the software, or is it is it a bad process?
No, it's both. I actually sometimes write at the computer a little bit, but mostly I write by hand.
And why would you write at the computer as opposed to this? What would be the advantage?
Oh, I'm not talking about the music. I meant lyrics. Lyrics I sometimes write.
Oh, I see.
No, I never write anything at the computer. No, I don't want to learn. It's a long process to learn something like Finale, and I think this is in a certain way quicker. And
yes.
If I didn't have a copyist, then of course I think I would.
When you know what a song, where a song is meant to be and what it's meant to do, does that mean that you already have a purchase on how to approach it? Does it coalesce slowly?
Almost always. Oh, but that in a dialogue with the book writer, which is where all these things come up, if I get an idea, it's because I have a real idea. It's that thing. I'm sure you get it too, where you actually see the whole thing, but you don't see any of the details. It's just you know what it's going to be. You know what it's going to feel like. You sort of know where it's going to begin and end. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes you just start with a thread and you have to work it out. I don't know how much you talk with your book writer before you write. I talk extensively. I mean, really extensively. And first of all, wanting to get to know what the characters are like. And secondly, how songs can help the show as opposed to hinder it. Because that's the hard part, is you really have to, it's always elusive. Should this be a musical or not? Or should it be a play?
At this stage of your career, with all the success you've had, does that make you impregnable to the kind of fear that would keep you standing still?
Oh, you get less confident as you get older. I'm sure you've heard this before. It's just the more you know, the more you're frightened. And also, when you build up a reputation and people are expecting things from you,
Yes.
and well, you know that yourself, the expectations make you very hesitant about doing anything else. And it gets, and also at my age, the energy level is going, and I mean, it's all, the balloon is collapsing. But that's the only thing that concerns me, really. However, if you get into something that you're really interested in, then that does disappear.
Yeah, that stuff goes away.
But you really have to, and it is not, it's not that hard to get into it once you've found something you can get into, but you have to find the thing.
Right, and before that, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, it really is, and it makes you not want to write.
Well, when I played you my music for the first time when I was 14, I came in all puffed up thinking I'd be rained with compliments and things. And I think it was right here, and I played you my things, and you had some very direct things to say, and I left crestfallen, of course, and you wrote me a letter that said, I didn't mean to be not very encouraging. I mean to be constructive, and that's the best form of encouragement. It was a very direct and a very kind letter, and very much in the spirit of teaching, and that's who you are to me.
Oh, well, that's nice. But that's a direct reflection of that afternoon. I've told the story 5,000 times about going over to Oscars, having written this school show, and I gave it to him because I thought he would want to produce it on Broadway, and I waited overnight, and I just knew that just like you, that when I over there, he'd say, Steve, you're going to be the first 15-year-old to have and Dick and I are so proud to present this. And I said, treat me as if you didn't know me. He said, oh, in that case, it's the worst thing I ever read. But he said exactly to me what I said to you, which is, he said, I didn't say it wasn't talented. I said it's no good. And here, if you want to know why it's no good, I'll tell you. And he told me. I just love passing on what Oscar passed on to me. Just before he died, gave me a portrait of himself, and I asked him to inscribe it, which is weird when you think that it's like asking your father to inscribe something. And he wrote, I'm gonna cry. He wrote, for Stevie, my friend and teacher. And that describes Oscar better than any other way I can describe him.